last thing was that you spent money on. I'm going to formally introduce myself and introduce Stella now. And I'm Lindsay. If you don't know me, I am the founder of Mind Money Balance. I am a mixed Filipina, very indoorsy, Midwesterner, Virgo sun. Birthday's coming up this weekend, Enneagram 8. And as a certified financial therapist, but coming from a social work background, I really love the intersection of money and mental health, but also how all of those things tie into the systems in which we live. When I am not listening to garbage podcasts about pop culture, I'm usually planning a travel hacking based trip or spoiling my dog who is at my feet right now. And for folks who don't know Stella, Stella is also a mixed Filipinx human being and is learning to feel at ease with the possibility of rooting, meaning they've been traveling literally all over the place and have been having the sensation of like, ooh, do I want to go home? What is home? I'm very excited to dive into that. And as the CEO of My Gold Standard, they are also a certified trauma of money facilitator. Both Stella and I got our certifications in that. And with over 8 years of experience in fintech and wealth advocacy, they are a queer, non-binary, first-gen Filipinx American. Creating My Gold Standard empowered them to use their voice, live their truth, and embrace their own financial revolution. So tell us, as you are joining here, what are you hoping to get out of the conversation? As a person joining in, what we know is that a lot of us listen passively, which is fine. If I'm cooking dinner, sometimes I'll throw on a YouTube live or put in my podcast. If it is safe for you to do so and you're multitasking, pause for a second and come back and type into the comments or type into the chat what it is specifically that you want to get out of our time together today. That will help us to move forward together as we dive in. So, Stella, let's start with you. What comes up when you hear the word wealth?
Ooh. When I hear the word wealth now is very different from when I heard the word wealth back in the day, which was just like 2 years ago. And I still have a very complex relationship with that word. But right now, what comes up for me is this sense of fullness and enoughness, actually, like feeling content and at ease, and that I have all my needs met, all my wants and dreams met, and I'm moving past the idea of just surviving, but truly thriving in this world, even as a participant in this economy. So that's what it means to me. Yeah, now. Back in the day, it was complicated. I was like, wealth is evil.
Okay.
You know, I just think of billionaires and how they're wreaking havoc on this planet.
Yeah.
And it makes me mad that like the word wealth is associated with that, because I wouldn't describe them as wealthy, actually.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing what was hard for you about the word wealth. I didn't want to jump to any conclusions about why it might have been difficult. But you and I share similar philosophies about it. I think I've gone through kind of a pendulum swing in my relationship with the word wealth. I remember when I was kind of first starting out in my business, how it seemed like people were using the word wealth to talk about being empowered and being financially secure and taking ownership of the way in which they use their life. And that really resonated with me. And then as I got deeper into that world, it was really just exploitative capitalism in disguise, like underneath so-called safe language, right? A lot of these people talking about wealth were also talking about things like inclusion and feminism and equity. And I was like, oh, it's all together. But then I got there and I became a little bit jaded, because I just, words to me are very important. And so if somebody says, hey, I believe in wealth and intersectionality and all these things, I'm going to take that at face value. And so I felt a little bit like my nervous system was shocked when I was like, oh, that sounds exactly it. And then I got in and I was like, oh, no, this is just like a wolf in sheep's clothing. And so then I kind of pulled away, I feel like, from anything really tangibly money and wealth related, because I was like, well, it's all bad. Kind of like you were saying, it's just billionaires. It's just people who want to exploit. It's just people who want to extract. And I'm getting much cozier with the word wealth, though I guess wellness feels still like a nice stepping stone to get to coming into feeling safe around wealth. So I'm getting there, and being in community with you has been incredibly helpful. So somebody shared in the chat that their goal for attending is to expand the idea of what wealth activism could look like, both ethically and joyfully. Ooh, yes. So good. So good.
I love that.
So, yeah. And as folks are listening in, I want you to pause too and think about what you would want to get out of this conversation. Another anonymous person is sharing their goal is to learn how we're each talking about wealth as someone who struggles with having it and disagreeing with how wealth is accumulated. Yeah, there's a term for this, anonymous. In the literature, it's called financial survivor guilt. And a lot of people who come from generational wealth or inherit money, they experience survivor guilt much in the way that we might expect a person who survives a car accident to cope, to just struggle with that guilt. So thank you for sharing that. So let's back up just a touch. We talked about wealth. We talked about kind of what makes it hard for us. Why did you, Stella, end up going this direction? Because I know you shared earlier you came from a financial literacy background. So what initially drew you to financial literacy / agency? And then how did you kind of skip forward to where you are now?
Yeah, so how to answer that question. So when I got into the career path of financial literacy, it was out of actual need. Like, I had a experience where my father unexpectedly passed away, had no will, nothing at all related to money planned out. He had some stuff in a 401k somewhere. He did have life insurance, which like regular term life, like basic term life insurance. So it did help in some way, but it came at me as a shock because my, mother, who is a immigrant from the Philippines, she was like, I don't know how to do any of this money stuff. So like, can you teach me? Because now like your dad isn't here. And I was like, cool. I don't know how to do any of that stuff either, because I wasn't taught any of that. And so I really started off with education being the root, being like, you just have to know these things, and then you can do these things. And then when you do those things, you will become financially empowered. But, but this is a but, actually. This is definitely a but. When I went, similar experience as you, when I went into spaces of financial literacy, I had the assumption that like financial literacy would include mental health, would include, intersectionality, and would include actually unpacking these systems and isms that we exist in. And it didn't. It didn't at all. So yeah.
I'm going to let you keep going, but I want to reflect on that point for a moment. First, thank you for being so open about where this came from, and any loss like that can be just so gut-wrenching. And then to deal with the bureaucracy of money on top of it just makes it really hard to be fully present and grieve. And the thing you said was something that I think a lot of us assume. We assume because we're in a place, you and I are both in the United States, or at least raised in the United States, where education is touted as the absolute means to an end. And so when we see things like financial education programs or financial literacy programs, it makes perfect sense that we would think that they would be more holistic and more well-rounded. So I just wanted to point that piece out, because you are not alone in thinking like, oh, this must be the golden ticket. But I'll let you keep going. So how did that move you toward helping people achieve financial agency or literacy before you ended up where you are now?
Yeah. So I worked at a company, at a fintech company, where it was all about the financial literacy, like all about the financial literacy. It's like you just give them a plan and they do the plan, and that's that. That's your job, which I'm like, okay, I get that. Like, this isn't the holistic one-stop shop. Okay. I can wrap my head around that. But I couldn't work there with that. Like, I felt like I was altering myself to just fit in this I'm the educator role, when I wanted to be the role of like a guide and of a person to confide in, and and to be a teacher and to be a coach. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity, because I ended up just having conversations naturally with all my clients there that would feel so activated and heated by just sharing with me, a stranger, their financial situation. And that's like when it impacted me. I really changed my philosophy and what I wanted to do, and focus on wealth as something more than and greater than just money, and what we've seen it, how we've seen it reflected in our society. That's where I made my, like, not switch, but I just opened up my world a bit more and my work a bit more. And that's why I'm here, like, talking to you. And you say something that is so important that I find really, really valuable. And it's that education doesn't always equal transformation. And I really felt that. Like, you can't, change. There are certain things that you can't do with just having like an education. You have to focus on your mind and your heart and your mental health. And also, there are systems in place as well that can prohibit you and inhibit you and be a barrier to you actually doing all the financial literacy things.
Yeah, even the thing that is supposed to get us out of struggling financially, whatever that means, right? I think that people can struggle financially, literally, if you're living in a paycheck to paycheck scenario. And plenty of my clients have enough money on paper and still continue to struggle because we're not acknowledging the system that we live in. Yeah. So when I think about kind of how I ended up doing this work, it's interesting because I come from layers and layers and layers of financial privilege. I grew up in a household where my mom did a lot of narration around what money is and how it works. And I grew up in rural Michigan in a very low cost of living area where my father took a job in rural healthcare. So he was a physician in a rural area, low cost of living, making a good living. So we were most definitely some of the most financial privileged in the small town that I grew up in. And at the same time, there was almost always this message about the importance of saving and paying yourself first and making sure that you don't over leverage yourself. And there were these little sprinkles of my mom's financial values throughout my life. So one thing was like, she did not and continues to not care about clothes. Like, I kid you not, she has like 4 outfits for the entire year. And that's one for winter, one for summer, one for spring, one for fall. But we spent a lot on travel. And when we traveled, we would do a lot of road trips and we would like pack our lunches and pack our snacks. Like, I remember one of the first times I was driving somewhere in high school with a friend and we stopped to get gas and they went into the gas station to pick up snacks. And my mind like exploded. I was like, you can do that? You can buy things in there? Like, to me, a gas station was to get gas and to go pee and pretend you were buying a water, right? Like that was it. So I came from layers of financial privilege, and I went to grad school for social work. And I think a part of that, as I reflect back on it, is this subconscious trying to push away that because I come from financial privilege, I don't want to be associated with some of the things you mentioned earlier. I don't want to be seen as greedy. I don't want to be seen as out of touch. I don't want to be seen as bad. So I know what I'll do. I'll do something that is good, because in our country, in our society, being a good person means you do things where you're giving. You become a social worker, a nurse, a teacher. You are a helper and a healer. And therefore, money doesn't matter because you're just such a good person. And fun fact, when you finish up a master's degree and work at a nonprofit, you can be the best, goodest version of yourself. And we still live in a society where you need money to live. So even with all of the layers of financial privilege that I had, when I got my first paycheck at that nonprofit, it was less than the money that I was making when I was a waitress. And it was this smack in the face of, oh my gosh, I've squandered my privilege. What a waste. How can I do this? What will I do? How am I going to survive? And my mental health that had previously been pretty well managed came like roaring back with a vengeance. My anxiety got worse. My depression got worse. I developed insomnia for the first time in my life. And it was coming face to face with the reality that you can have all of the education, you can do all of the good things, and yet we live in a society where you do need money to function. And we can pretend that being good will take care of all of our needs, but it won't. And the antidote to me is to not say, well, I know, I'll just go live on a commune. You and I run in similar circles. I have friends who have done that. And guess what? It's great until they slip and fall and a tractor runs over their foot or their leg, and they're in the healthcare system, and then they're in mountains of debt. So we can pretend to kind of play outside of the society that we are in. But to me, it's this both and of how can we focus on dismantling some of these harmful systems while making sure we survive on the journey, right? We cannot be starving and hungry and thirsty, and I'm talking about money in this point, to get there. So I went on a tangent of like how I ended up here, but then kind of segueing into wealth activism. I think something that has come up as I've watched you have these conversations with folks is that I think a lot of people have misconceptions about wealth activism, about it being, you know, donating all of your money or living off the grid or only working a job with passion. But that is not necessarily the case. Can you kind of dispel some of the myths that you've heard when you talk to people about this concept of wealth activism?
Yeah. So thank you for sharing your journey, because I don't think I knew the details of like what you experienced, especially like the fact that you were a waitress before, went to school, got a graduate degree, you have a master's, have the career, like you did the thing that the system tells you to do, and you got paid shit.
Yeah. And like I will have you answer this question again, but the one thing that I didn't share that was so hard is I turned to education again to help myself get out of that situation. So I went to the library and I would literally check out like armfuls and armfuls of books about financial literacy. And every single one of those books was telling me, you're bad, you're wrong, you're dumb, right? You're not saving enough. You're spending too much. You have too much debt. And I'm like,
It's you.
I'm literally taking all of the money I earn and spending it on things just to survive, right? I'm putting gas in my car, making sure my rent is paid. I'm buying my groceries. And that was a big realization that we demonize people who are trying to get better with money by shaming them for what they're doing. And the big piece about financial literacy that thankfully has shifted, I think, over the past few years, but certainly when I was trying to figure it out 15 years ago, the dominant narrative was save more, you know, spend less, and not advocate for higher wages, right? Because we know that to have financial security, we need to increase the gap between what comes in and what goes out. And so many financial literacy books just talked about stopping the flow out, but they never talked about bringing up that top line. And it just made no sense to me. Like, why are we only focusing on one teensy part of the equation. So anyway, okay. So what do people get wrong about wealth activism, Stella? Before I go on another tangent.
Yeah, I mean, I love your tangents. I'm like here for that. And I'm like resisting on going on my own tangent with your tangent. But yeah, so what I think some myths are, and this is just like what I think and feel, because when we think about the accumulation of wealth from what we've just seen, so we see very privileged, affluent white folks, billionaires, like corporations, even politicians, like celebrities, like we just see what wealth is supposed to be like and what it looks like. But my thing is that I wouldn't, and I'm reiterating this again because I think it's important, I wouldn't call those people wealthy. Like if you were truly wealthy, you wouldn't be killing our planet. You wouldn't be oppressing other people in marginalized communities. You wouldn't be creating a system like this where like you are just like wreaking havoc and you're perpetuating that. You know, that's not being wealthy or having wealth to me. There's actually someone that I think it was another billionaire from Australia, and his like interview is pretty viral right now. I just saw it this morning, and he basically was like, all of the workers are ungrateful and they're not working hard enough, and that's why this economy is sucking right now. And we need to change their mindsets to remember that actually they work for you, the employer, not the other way around. And I just was like, bro, you think like that's like why we're in this like volatile economic situation? Like, no. And so I looked at that and people are like, you know, eat the rich. I totally believe in taxing the rich, like 100%. But I just saw that, and it was just like a lot of comments around how like, they're like, ew, I hate wealthy people. All this like narrative around, you know, the top wealthiest people in America. There's like an article that literally has that slated out, which I will drop as a resource. But I saw that, I was like, they got it all wrong. These aren't the top wealthiest people. They are the least wealthiest people. And what wealth means to me is that it is that community care. It is that relationship to land. It is that enoughness, that there is more than enough to go around for everyone, not just to survive. Because like, I think honestly, we need to get past just having survival be like our goal. We all deserve to thrive in this world and in this lifetime. So yeah, I just went on a tangent now. So
no, it's really, I think it's really important because I was asking like, what is wealth activism? What do people get wrong? And what you shared was like, what people get wrong is assuming that the way that a handful, 5-10 billionaires are portrayed is wealth. And when I hear you talking about wealth, what you're saying, Stella, is wealth is, yes, the financial piece. And it's also making sure that you are well in other areas of your life. And I think a big part of this is how do we find making sure that we have not just enough, right? That feels really scary to be breaking even, but to have enough of a safety net so that we can do some of the things that we want to do in our lives outside of this very narrow window of what we're quote unquote supposed to do. You shared earlier that like for you, a part of wealth is moving your body, is traveling, like being in community and being with other people. Those are kind of parts of your wealth. Now let's like tackle that second part of that word, the activism part. How does that come into play when we think about wealth activism if we're no longer defining wealth by just what somebody's net worth is?
I think the activism piece is the part of education that does matter to me.
Yeah.
And I say this like we all deserve to be financially educated and liberated.
Mm.
I do think that education just needs to be transformed to include mental health, spiritual health, and wealth, right? Mm-hmm. So when I think about that, and I think about just broadening what education means, I think about just school. Like, what did I feel like when I went to school? It was the community. It was knowing that I was learning with people, from people, together. And so the advocacy part is actually taking out, or not necessarily taking out or removing, but more so tipping the scales back to be more balanced, which is why I love your name, Mind Money Balance. But in this case, it's tipping the scales on financial literacy and education being so focused on the self, the individual, and having it be a community, having it be the responsibility of the collective for all of us to thrive. And I think that that's the activism part for me. It's bringing us together to advocate together, because when the responsibility falls on one person, that's a burden. It shouldn't be on one person. It shouldn't even be on one group of people. It should be on all of us. Yeah. That's the activism piece for me.
I'm obsessed with this. So when I'm hearing you talk about wealth activism, the activism piece is the advocacy piece to make things less individual and more communal. And kind of thinking about some of the folks who shared things in the chat, like, I also think there is such a hyper focus on individualisms that for the people who do have financial privilege, they're in a steady job, they have their emergency fund, maybe they got some sort of inheritance or they're planning on paying for their kids to go to school. It is also not their individual responsibility to try and fix the broken system. Rather, it is, what can they do that fits into their financial picture that feels good? And how can they find little strings that they can tug on within their community that feel good to be the strings that they tug on, right? So if housing is a big issue for somebody and they have the means to do so, can they make sure to invest some of their overflow financially into housing resources in their community? Or is it making sure that even just like you have neighbors that you know their name, right? I've lived many places where you like kind of smile and wave and don't really even know your neighbors' names. And it's like we forget that the people we live next to and around are a part of our community. So just thinking about less of, I need to give it all away in order to be a good person, and much more, what do I do with this extra, right? That how can I use whatever that extra is? And you mentioned earlier that different life domains, we might have more wealth to give, right? So if I maybe am financially strapped, but I have the capacity to give back by caring for my neighbor's kids in the evenings, that may be, like I might have a wealth of time in the evenings, let's say.
Absolutely.
Right? That would be a way that we can engage with community in a meaningful way. So for folks maybe who are listening right now and they're like, well, I'm kind of in that how do I make ends meet place, I do think there's a way to practice wealth activism by thinking about other life domains.
Yeah. And to add to that, I think that sometimes we can honestly get confused, and the lines can get blurred, because you brought this up a lot and I'm curious why, but this idea of like being a good person.
Oh yeah.
Because like, what does that even mean? You know? And a lot of the times we so focus on becoming a good person because of that shame. And you mentioned like financial survivor guilt, which I actually never heard of that before. But I know what that means, because I have my mom, and then along with some clients that I've worked with, but let me just speak to my mom's experience. She came from poverty in the Philippines under like the Marcos regime. And when she got here, and this is her thing with her financial behaviors, she actually told me this. She's like, I give my money all away, so it's like I have no money. because like I just want to not spend. So she'll do two things. She'll save, like hoard it, save.
Yeah.
So she has this illusion of safety and security, or she will go and give it all away because of the guilt, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's steeped in so many things like
Yeah, for
Catholicism,
sure.
colonization, all that, but we can't get into that. And, you know, just the time that we have today. But I share that because there is this guilt around surviving. And one thing that I want to, get clear on is that I don't call it like financial activism, because I don't want, again, I want to decenter
the money piece.
Because there's so many different ways that we can redistribute our resources. And it's a reminder to people that feel like they are not a good person by not having enough money to redistribute and support. And that's why, like, I love that your Instagram post was like, is wealth activism giving all your money away? It's like, no, but maybe you don't have time, or sorry, maybe you don't have money, but you have time, or maybe you don't have any of those things, because that can be so true. And maybe actually you're in a place where you're the one that needs to be receiving. So that's another
say that last one again, because I think that's really hard for people to hear.
Yes. And actually, so, okay, woof, I just like got flooded with so many exciting things that came to my mind. But a lot of people, they feel like they aren't worthy of receiving, that they're only a good member of society if they're always contributing. And it's like, no, like, you are allowed to receive. You are allowed to receive support. However, receiving is very vulnerable.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Stella. And it goes back to when you were like kind of sprinkling the question to me of why was I saying being good means not having money, and you nailed it, because we associate being good with sacrifice, with giving, right? When we think about the archetype of like the good mom, it's the one who's at all of the soccer games, who's baking the brownies, who's picking people up from everywhere, who never has a hair out of place, who is giving constantly. But we don't think about like, what is the mom who says, I'm sleep deprived, I need a nap to be a good human being, not even just like a parent. I'm going to tell my neighbor, you need to watch my kid for 30 minutes so I can close my freaking eyes. To me, that's also giving and receiving. So to kind of think about, I just dropped into the chat to think about, you know, the concept that Stella and I have talked about with wealth activism is that wealth is not just financial. There are other domains in our lives that are important to be well in. And the activism piece doesn't have to be this grand scale. And in fact, when we think about the way that communities have been for millennia, it's these close-knit communities that are the closest to us in proximity. That is how we can be active, right? Activism is just active. How can you be active within your community to both give and receive? So if you think about that for folks who are here and are listening and are maybe wiping some tears because we're going there, what's one thing that you might do differently in your life if you just tried on for size the wealth activism mindset that Stella and I are talking about? You don't have to do anything drastic. You don't have to do anything huge, but like, what's one teensy thing you might be able to shift if you thought about giving and receiving in community and about taking care of yourself outside of and including the financial lens? I would love to hear what people have to say. And again, if you don't want me to read your name, just type anon or anonymous at the beginning and I will be sure to omit it. So I would invite people to think about that as we continue on, because it's so important. That the reason I'm inviting people to join in on this conversation is that, going back to earlier when I was like, a lot of us do passive listening. A lot of us think that to do something radical requires something huge. And to me, it's like the opposite. It's like these teensy little things are actually radical acts of, to use your language, wealth activism. Yeah. Okay. So somebody shared, If I adopted a wealth activism mindset, it would be a reminder to relish in the time, energy, freedom that I have to connect more deeply with loved ones in the community that I'm building. I love that. Love that.
That was
So
juicy.
good. So juicy. I totally lost my train of thought, Stella. I'm like,
now we're like, yes. Well, I
know.
do have something to share
Go,
with
please.
you
Yes.
of how like I view you as like a wealth activist. Is
Oh my
that
gosh,
you?
now I'm gonna cry. Don't do it. I'm gonna be vulnerable to receive.
Yes, receive. And I've been following your work for a long time. I don't know if you know this, but it's been like a while. I think since like 2017 or 18.
That is so like truly, truly mind-boggling, because when we had this conversation and met before, you told me that, and I was like, Stella.
You're like, oh my God, you were there like at the beginning.
I
Yes,
know.
I was. And you have evolved and blossomed in so many different ways, which has been so amazing to watch. But it's also been really wonderful to see you stay in this space. Like you're just getting louder and louder and louder, actually, of what you believe in, which is mental wealth, like the wealth that's in your mind, and like pouring into that.
Thank you.
I
That
don't know. That really
means a lot.
I really see that in you, and I'm like, yeah, like Lindsay gets it. Like you get it.
Okay. Thank you. And I will not deflect. What I will say is that transition that I have undergone through in my business life and in part of my work's mission has been quite challenging, in that another kind of cornerstone of this very narrow-minded way that we're supposed to be in business and work as humans is to like pick a lane and stay there forever. And it took me a long time to be like, are people going to want to come on the ride if I expand a little? Like, what's going to happen if I really tell people what I think about these different policies and systems? So it was really frightening to do that. So I really appreciate you noticing that and honoring that. Someone else shared, when it comes to wealth activism, I would like to buy more local more often and support more small businesses online as my children explore their identity and learning more about the world and people. Yes.
Oh, I love that.
So good. So good.
Local is where it's at.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Okay. This is going to tie into the wealth activism, because you just said local is where it's at. You shared, I'm not telling things that people don't know, but you shared that for a long, long time, travel was what like kind of fulfilled your self-growth and curiosity bucket. And you kind of had this pang or this knowing to want to root or to come home. How does that play into your version of wealth activism?
I don't even know, because I'm processing it right now. But I will say, when it comes to rooting, when you're traveling like all over the world, spending a month here, 3 months there, and then like coming back to where you grew up and feeling that difference of like, oh, I feel disconnected from my community because like I'm not here pouring into it. I'm out in the world getting poured into. So I went on a travel journey this year because I was feeling really jaded, really exhausted, not because of the lack of community that I didn't have in my hometown. I actually had a wealth of community, which is amazing. I just was feeling so exhausted and extracted from the system that we live in. And so I was like, my money I can receive more and experience more with this currency privilege that I have if I travel to these countries that, like we were in earlier this year, all of our travel has been in Latin America. And to experience like the financial privilege was mind-boggling to me. And also the privilege of like getting to know how other cultures and other people do things and think about things and are experiencing that. was like, I feel like that has been me going on this like journey of just being a dried up sponge and trying to get water poured into me so I can expand. And now I'm feeling, oh, I'm getting full again. I'm getting my energy back. I got so poured into from all these experiences. Now maybe it's time for me to root. And where do I want to root? Someplace new? Or do I want to root where I'm from or where my partner's from? He's from Hawaii. And that's where we were just in the last month. So we're still figuring it out, but I'm pretty sure we'll end up rooting again in one of those places.
Yeah, I love that, the way that you're practicing wealth activism through sometimes stillness and sometimes movement is by honoring what your body needs while also doing it in community. Like I'm pointing out these things because we have a tendency to be very black and white. I'm either selfish or I'm in community. I either have a high net worth and I'm bad, or a low net worth and I'm good, right? We tend to do a lot of these black and white. So I'm intentionally pointing out how we can both take care of ourselves and take care of our communities at the same time. And in fact, it's much better when we do, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I would love to invite folks, if you have questions for Stella or myself, to feel free to type them in the chat. Are there, I want to ask a question that is a little with my lens. We've been talking about wealth activism, but my business is called Mind Money Balance. And I think there are so many different ways, much like we've talked about wealth activism, to practice mind money balance. Is there a specific way or a favorite way that you are practicing mind money balance or getting your mind and money in balance right now?
Yeah. So I meditated a bit on this answer because I just wanted to answer it very intentionally because it's a really thoughtful question. And as I like poured into this question with my answers, what came up a lot for me was communing with my ancestors through ritual and remembering their abundant roots, like even in the form of money and finance as a resource, because before, all the shitty colonization and dictators, like they were overflowing with abundance. And communing with nature, like having my soul filled by immersing myself in the wisdom of nature. And I mentioned, communing with my body in the form of, Muay Thai and being in it. That has been how I've kept my mind and money in balance, because I will share like a practical thing that I use because the reason I'm able to do all those things is because I use this tool. It's called You Need a Budget. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Of course. Yeah. I did it for a year.
Sometimes it feels like it can be so annoying. I'll be real, because of like, it's still a tool that's like technology, and technology can be annoying sometimes.
Sure.
But what I really find helpful is that, it gives me the mental clarity and relief to be like, oh, I do have the money to invest in myself in the financial sense, like going to Muay Thai and, because that's not cheap. It isn't, or taking a trip and, seeing what I have in my travel savings bucket. And also wealth redistribution being a thing, like having that as a line item in my budget, being like, I'm putting aside I do 50 now, $50 a month. And I am in a wealth redistribution circle. So we give to each other.
That is amazing. If you have resources for how you got that started or got involved, I would love to share that with my community, because I think rightfully a lot of my community comes from the nonprofit space, and they have some resistance to, the murkiness of that world. We don't want to go on another tangent, but yeah, if you would share some resources, that would be great. And thank you for for being so thoughtful about this answer and for adding on a tactical one.
Yeah.
Again, pointing out this nuance here is that we can do tactical things to take care of our mind-money balance, such as using a tool like YNAB or You Need a Budget. And we can be incredibly intentional and meditate and journal on things and realize that we're in touch with our lineage in a different way. My answer today, at this moment in time, is very specific. I am on week 9 of dealing with COVID fatigue, and I know it sucks.
9.
I know.
Ugh.
I know. So, and what I am thankful for is that my partner and I have like a lot of different sinking funds. And I'm so thankful that we have a sinking fund that we call like kind of life happens. So it's not our emergency fund. This is just like, oh, we have a flat tire, or, oh, our water bill is larger than we thought. The traditional term is just a plain old sinking fund. But being able to pull from that to get manual lymphatic drainage massage sounds so weird, but I can't really move my body right now, right? If I take walks or go on bike rides, that was a big part of my life, my mental health, my physical health, my sleep. Everybody knows the benefits of movement. And so to have that gone has really impacted me. And so to be able to get somebody else to help me move my body has been a really good literal way that I'm practicing mind-money balance at this snapshot in time.
I love that you call it. So I don't like the word sinking fund, which is why I like don't even use it. And I love it because it sounds like a ship is sinking. That doesn't sound cool.
Such a good point. And that's why I don't like the word budget. And that's why I call it a spending plan. Because to me, budget sounds so restrictive, but spending plan sounds so expansive. So
exactly. And you call it a life happens fund. And I'm like, yeah, life happens. I have a tattoo that says life is life, which is pretty much my version of life happens.
Yes.
And also life is what you make of it. And
it
can be so many things.
Oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with that, Stella. And Stella, before we like officially go, you have something cool and new that you are doing after having this big series of ahas this year when it comes to wealth and money and your role in it. You are rolling out a new wealth collectivism offer. Can you talk about this?
Activism Collective.
Yes, Wealth Activism Collective. Got it.
Yes. So in the spirit of community care and, having the weight of navigating through the world of not just financial literacy, but like having money and this economy that we live in, capitalism, and all these isms that we live in, right? Having to navigate that alone is like not fun at all. And so I started the Wealth Activism Collective, which I just launched literally today. So wow, thank you.
Perfect for new moon and Virgo, if I do say so myself.
I did not even put that together. I've been so panicked by Mercury retrograde. I'm like, when is this going to end?
Because it's a really good day to start something new. Very auspicious.
Yeah. So yeah, it's both a school and community, because the thing that I found limiting for me is that the financial literacy just leans so heavy on the educational side of things, but not the community side of things, or not the emotional and spiritual and mental health side of things. And so I wanted to put the learning and the being in community together in one place. And it's really this offering is a protest in my opinion. It's like me. It's like I'm going back to April where I had my meltdown, and I was like, financial literacy doesn't even matter. None of that matters, blah, blah, blah. And being like, I maybe want to just burn down everything that I've done and burn down this business because none of it matters. Like I went to a dark place. Yeah. And then I was like, no, that's what they want. They want me to believe that none of this matters. And so I'm going to say it matters so much, and I'm going to make a whole new offering. And I want this to be a movement to remind people that it does matter.
Yeah.
So that's what the Wealth Activism Collective is all about.
Okay. So it's a space to learn, to give, and to receive. And it is about nurturing the financial piece because it does matter. And also making sure that you're nurturing all the other things that help to make a person wealthy. And it
Yeah.
sounds like in having this community support, you get that validation and that space to be able to say, hey, I need XYZ, and to have other people in there who get where you're coming from and understand the struggles of living in a really broken system to be able to say, I got you. I got you. And what are you hoping members will get out of this?
I'm hoping that they will get hope again.
Mm.
Like the world that we live in can feel, and sometimes we can believe it to be so hopeless.
Yeah.
Sometimes I still have that. Like, I'm not saying that I'm like positive all the time or that I'm this believer all the time.
Yeah.
I want this to be a space to be like, I feel, because that's what got me through what like I went through this year. I lost hope, and I was like, y'all, like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And people poured into me being like, no, that's what they want you to believe. That's what they want you to think. And that's what I want people to take away, that it can be hopeless and feel hopeless. But when we are together, when we are in community, you don't have to go through it alone.
That is so, so beautiful, Stella, and such an important reminder that we have to continue to thrive. We have to continue to find joy, to take care of ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. It is not about just like getting by, and it can be, and I don't say this from a place of judgment because I've been there too, but it can be easy to slide into nihilism and be like, well, I can't do anything. The system is so broke. Like, what's the point? And so here you really clearly call it out and be like, no, it really matters because every single one of us matters, is like you said, it's such a protest and it's such a way to take back our joy and our power and our spirit. So I honor you in this new venture. And for folks who signed up for this, you'll get a little note about Stella's offer as well. And where can people find you and follow you and keep up with you as you continue on this radical journey and helping bring people along to hold on to their hope?
Yeah, so y'all can follow me on Instagram, just my gold standard. I am a real human being. I am in charge of my Instagram account. So if you want to introduce yourselves or say hi, slide into my DMs. Yes. Like, I do welcome that. And then you can reach my work. So mygoldstandard.co, that's my website. And yeah, that's and here. So hi, hello, it's me. It's so nice to meet you.
Yeah. Thank you for this conversation, and thank you everyone for showing up. I know when we talk about things that aren't like an easy downloadable, there isn't an easy PDF for how to do wealth activism. It can seem a little bit daunting, but the fact that so many of you showed up, and I'm honoring that everyone is taking the time to like use Stella's words to let this kind of like soak in and marinate, it is really, really powerful. So a reminder, this replay will be available basically ASAP. The chat will no longer be available once I end the stream. So if you commented anything, don't worry, your name will be released from this, and I will share in the YouTube description and in an email follow-up some of the resources that Stella shared. And with that, everybody have a beautiful evening and a happy Virgo new moon.
Yay!
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.